Understanding the terrain of the gut is quite important and instrumental in helping to understand what the root cause of someone's skin issue can be. So knowing where to direct your efforts to improve gut health and improve digestion, lower inflammation, which is the route to addressing skin issues.
What's up, ladies? Welcome to the health class She Deserves, the show where we ditch outdated women's health myths and talk real bodies, real cycles, and real stories. I'm your host, Autumn Payon, and today we are joined by gut health specialist and functional nutritionist, Jacqui Meehan. Jacqui is a holistic nutritionist and gut health specialist that uses functional lab testing and a bio-individual approach to help women address issues like IBS, skin issues such as acne, dermatitis, and eczema, and hormonal chaos such as PCOS, PMDD, and endometriosis. Jacqui believes in the resilience and wisdom found in every body, and by supporting digestion and gut health, everyone can live a vibrant life. Her own journey to heal ulcerative colitis, PMDD, and Hashimoto's has left her with immense empathy for those on their healing journey. Her experience within the conventional medical system often let her down, feeling lost and confused. So through her work, she aims to empower and inspire. Thriving is possible for anyone with the right support. Jacqui lives in Northern California on a farm where she grows most of her own food, but her favorite thing to grow is flowers. Jacqui, welcome to class.
Thanks for having me, Autumn. I'm so excited for this conversation.
We are excited to have you here on the Health Class She Deserves. So I'd love to start at the beginning because your journey into functional nutrition began with a lot of personal struggles. Can you talk to us a little bit about them and how that led you to where you are now?
Sure. Yeah. So my health journey was quite a ride. It began about a little over 10 years ago. So the first major thing to happen to me was an ulcerative colitis diagnosis. Up until that point, I had never really had any health issues. So when I started passing blood in my stool, it was quite alarming. And so I went and saw a gastroenterologist for a colonoscopy. I woke up from anesthesia to my doctor telling me that I had ulcerative colitis. And for those that don't know, this is a chronic disease. It's similar to Crohn's. So many people have to manage this throughout their whole lives. And the doctor did not explain that to me. He just handed me a prescription that I went to a pharmacy to realize I couldn't afford this prescription. And so with this, and then going home and Googling this new diagnosis that I had, it kind of thrust me into the world of alternative health. And it got way worse before it got better. I tried a lot of different kind of crazy things that I found on the internet. But when I eventually invested to go see a naturopath, he actually made some pretty simple recommendations to change my diet. I cut out dairy and gluten, and it was almost like a miracle. Within a couple weeks, most of my health problems went away. And it was like this kind of watershed moment of realizing how important what we eat is to our health. And I was still pretty young then. So just by making these changes, my health stayed pretty good for some years. But then I got off of birth control, which I had been on for 10 years. And this completely rocked my world. I started having irregular cycles, really insane PMS. It was actually premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is like PMS, but on rocket fuel. And then also a lot of acne. And so that just led to a lot of confidence issues and insecurities. And so again, I sought help from a gynecologist, and she recommended me birth control. I was like, no, thank you. So again, I felt like very much on my own to figure this out. It was at that point that I realized how important some of the lifestyle factors are to health. Things like your beliefs about yourself and sleep, movement, healing trauma. And so it really, I don't know, this kind of like greater picture came together. And the more I had to work on learning about my health to heal myself, the deeper I went. And I was like, I might as well go to school for this. And I just fell in love with learning about the body, learning about the functional medicine approach. And I put my ulcerative colitis, Hashimoto's, PMDD, and PCOS all into remission. And so now it is my mission to help other women do the same.
That's amazing, and I love those stories where it's like you were in that spot because then when you're working with clients as well, like, you know how they're feeling. You have such a deeper level of empathy then, for people who are just starting out. I love how you said, like, you tried a bunch of, like, crazy things that you just found on the internet because I do think that's, like, one of those things in the modern world where it's like that is what a lot of women are left with. Like, and there's a lot of, snake oil salesmen on the internet, a lot of unqualified influencers just trying to sell something and that don't actually know or care about true health. And then there's people who are actually doing good, but it can be really difficult to discern the two. And when we have the, Western healthcare model failing so many women, disproportionately more women than they are failing men, we have a huge issue on our hands with women going down these, like, rabbit holes of, like, "What do I try now?" I love origin story and how you were like, "I'm not just gonna do this for myself, like, I'm gonna make sure other people also know that this is an option." You mentioned acne, which I think a lot of people have dealt with. I think that's a universal experience at some point in people's lives. I am thankful enough now that it's not something I deal with, but when I was a teenager, it was like bad. And I also was failed by the healthcare system where I went to a dermatologist and they gave me like this antibiotic. And so I took an antibiotic, which, you know, did probably insane things to my gut.
Mhm.
And it wasn't a long-term solution. And then, there's also people who end up going on Accutane. And I remember at that point in my life, it was like the confidence issue. I was like, I will do or take anything to feel beautiful again, like to not feel like I just have these big ugly things on my face all the time. So I would love to talk more about skin issues, acne, hormonal acne. Can you talk a little bit about hormonal acne specifically? What separates it from just any other reason that you might get acne?
So, I mean, well, skin issues, hormonal acne, rosacea, eczema, psoriasis, like any kind of chronic skin issue that we're seeing, there may be these hormonal components, but all of these can actually be tied back to the gut and digestion. So with acne and someone who's having it persistently, this is ultimately related to inflammation that is driving some kind of immune dysregulation or hormonal imbalance. And diet and lifestyle factors can be really important for understanding these imbalances. But often, like, I see this a lot with my clients, is a lot of people are doing many of the right things. But they've cut out dairy and they don't really eat any processed foods. They're exercising, they're getting good sleep, they're like living like little angels, but they still are having these chronic skin issues. And so it's not really about separating it between hormonal acne and other kinds of acne, because there may be something that's causing the hormones to be disrupted, but ultimately we need to first look at the gut, because the microbiome and our digestion is so important to skin health. And doing some testing can be really illuminating in understanding what these root causes can be. For example, something I see so often in acne clients is a lack of beneficial bacteria, and this often arises after going to a dermatologist and doing lots of antibiotics, but there can be other reasons. So our beneficial bacteria, they are not just like living in our gut and just being there. They actually play a big role in maintaining the gut barrier. Digestion in itself is actually quite an inflammatory process. And so these bacteria actually produce anti-inflammatory compounds that soothe the gut and protect the gut lining. So without the presence of these beneficial microbes, the gut lining can get pretty leaky. Inflammation can leak out of the gut into the body. And as inflammation becomes systemic, it can arise on the face. Another thing I often see is the presence of these like opportunistic bacteria or infections, parasites, and fungus. All of these things can actually be, instead of anti inflammatory, but pro inflammatory. And they can produce these nasty byproducts in their metabolism, things like methane and histamine, ammonia. All of these can disrupt digestion and create like diarrhea and constipation, bloating, and then again, weaken that gut barrier, lead to leaky gut, whereas inflammation can then become systemic and show up on the face. So understanding the terrain of the gut is quite important and instrumental in helping to understand what the root cause of someone's skin issue can be. So knowing where to direct your efforts to improve gut health and improve digestion, lower inflammation, which is the route to addressing skin issues.
When it comes to a very like a highly inflamed gut, I know you mentioned like gluten and dairy, obviously big culprits for inflammation. We all know alcohol can, be really inflammatory, but what else can also cause all that inflammation?
Mhm. Food can be a huge driver. So, I mean, your diet plays a really big role in insulin levels. And
Mhm.
so, one thing that people often like, let's cut out sugar to fix what's going on with my acne. But like, why is it that sugar is causing acne? And so, it actually comes down to insulin. So, when we have really high levels of blood sugar, when you eat a meal that contains carbohydrates, and then your body breaks it down into sugar, insulin is then released to shuttle that sugar into the cells. But insulin is actually a hormone and it's a growth hormone. And so the increase in insulin actually triggers the release of something called insulin growth factor 1, IGF-1. IGF-1 promotes the release of sebum in cells and also the proliferation of skin cells. So if like insulin is high, IGF-1 is high, skin cells start to proliferate and produce more sebum, which then can clog pores and cause acne. So it really is like this chronically high level of insulin that could be driving acne. So that's just one mechanism, and then there's so many other things that could be going on. Like I mentioned, if you have infection in the gut and then this wearing down of the gut lining, and you have all these organisms in the gut that are literally producing inflammatory chemicals that like leak into the bloodstream, and this can basically like put your immune system on overdrive. And your immune system is what creates inflammation. And so when there's a lot of immune activity, there's going to be a lot of inflammation. And that, again, can show up on the skin.
Right. So you mentioned gut testing before. So what other types of testing do you do, if any? And do you always start with testing, or are there some situations where you try things before you jump to testing?
hmm I find that testing can be such a great way to take out the guesswork. And so if someone has been dealing with a health issue for a long time and they've already like experimented with some things, like why not just test and not guess? If you're someone who is still in the early processes of like trying to understand if you need to work with a professional, sure, like experiment with your diet and like improving lifestyle stuff. But if you've been dealing with this for a while, I do think testing can be such a game changer. And so with my clients, I almost always run a stool test called the GI map. And that can be great to understand the terrain of the gut, allows us to see if there's issues with that beneficial microbial community, if there are infections present. I see infections in most of my clients that have acne. There's something with H. pylori or parasites. There's always something going on. And the GI map also allows us to look at how well you're digesting your food. And this plays such an important role in our health overall, but also with your skin, because your skin health is really reliant upon your ability to detox well and these vital nutrients for tissue repair and tissue growth. So the GI map allows us to see if there's low levels of digestive enzymes, if there's something going on with bile or stomach acid. So that can be just such a great tool for understanding like where you might need supplementation or if we need to like work on addressing these infections.
Hmm.
Another test that I really think can be so valuable for most people is looking into blood work. So this allows us to look at the different organ systems and get insight into if there's strain or bottlenecks in the body, and really understanding which organs might need more support. For example, a common driver of a lot of skin issues and metabolism issues is the thyroid. And even though um, thyroid imbalances are really common in women, many doctors are not really doing thorough testing to investigate the health of the thyroid.
Hmm.
And so by looking at that, and then I should also mention that when you're getting your blood drawn in most labs and by most doctors, the range that they're evaluating those blood markers with is called the lab range. And that range is based on um, statistical data, like on the averages of our population.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, due to the standard American diet and just the health of our population declining,
Hmm.
those lab ranges don't really measure optimal health. And
Hmm.
so you might get your labs back from a doctor and they're like, yep, you're totally normal, nothing's wrong. But when looking at what's called a functional range, which is more narrow and is a better measure of like what is optimal for humans, you may be able to detect imbalances that are driving symptoms like hair thinning or fatigue, acne, weight gain, and be able to see where your body needs support when you go to a doctor and they're telling you that everything's fine. So I really like looking at blood. I love looking at the microbiome. Those are the first places I typically start. I also offer like hair tissue mineral analysis and food sensitivity testing. I'll sometimes do hormone testing like the Dutch test,
Hmm.
but I think just starting with the gut and blood testing is a great place.
Definitely. And I think I love what you say about the optimal range versus like the range that it's based on, because that's always every time I get a blood test, I'm like, I'm fairly certain going into it that nothing's going to be crazy out of range, because I think those are typically, your Western doctor is trained to detect something more life threatening, something more extreme. Whereas if you're dealing with a chronic condition where, like, no, maybe your life's not necessarily in danger, but your quality of life is significantly poorer than it could be, and you want to look in that optimal range, I think that's something that not everyone fully understands, I guess, about when they're getting blood work done. Um, when you were talking about the gut and the GI map, you mentioned something about how the body is digesting. So it's can you unpack that a little more? Because it's not just about food then, right? It's about how the body is like handling that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually something I see all the time is people might be having they might have the best diet ever, they're only eating whole foods, it's, like, very intentional, yet they're having all these nutrient deficiencies because of this inability to digest their food. So you aren't really what you eat, you are what your body can absorb. In order to absorb your food, there needs to be some things going on. First of all, you need to have enough stomach acid, and in order to have enough stomach acid, you need to be eating while you're in a calm state of mind. So one way to do that is to just put away the phone while you're eating, take some deep breaths and kind of allow your brain to signal to your stomach it's time to digest. So having enough stomach acid is required to break down protein and absorb a lot of vitamins and minerals like zinc, iron. And so next, if you go into the next part of digestion, if you're not secreting enough digestive enzymes or bile, you're not going to be able to really break down fats and carbohydrates. So those things can be affected as well by like already having nutrient deficiencies, constant snacking, like not having time to rest in between meals. But yeah, there can really be like this breakdown in digestion just by not having the right tools in your body. And so you can support that to kind of like retrain the body to be secreting stomach acid and making enzymes. So that's a good place to start by titrating up with stomach acid support or taking some digestive enzymes, eating bitters before the meals to help stimulate bile. All these things are really important for making sure that you have the right juices to break the food down.
That's great. I think there's a lot of great advice there also for people, like you said, eating bitters beforehand. And I also heard about water, like if you drink, because I'm like a fish, I drink so much water. And I've heard people tell me that if I'm drinking that much water before a meal, it like waters down the digestive enzymes, I guess. I don't know. Is that just out of curiosity? Is that real? Should I not drink so much water before I eat?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like that as well. It's hard for me not to drink so much water, but it's not really doing you any favors.
Okay.
Yeah, so drinking water is obviously so important, and I'm a huge fan and in support of people getting enough hydration throughout the day. But if you can get that hydration more in between meals, you'll have better digestion.
Okay, good to know. I would love to circle back to the connection between hormone health and gut health because, like you were alluding to before, they're obviously like intimately connected and everything kind of starts in the gut most of the time. Can you just expand on that a little bit more about how they affect one another?
About hormone health and gut health.
Yeah.
Okay. So first, um, let's just define what a hormone is. So a hormone is a chemical messenger produced by a gland that is sent throughout the blood to either upregulate or downregulate a function. So your body's constantly sort of reacting to what's going on in the body to say like more of this or less of this. Once with our sex hormones like estrogen, testosterone and progesterone, we want to maintain a certain balance of these hormones because all of them are so interdependent, right? When one is out of whack, it kind of throws off the rest of them. So one way that our bodies maintain hormonal balance is through detoxing the spent hormones through the gut and through digestion. And so, when the system is working well, the spent hormones are processed by the liver and then they are converted into water soluble metabolites and then you poop them out. And since our female bodies are very sensitive to imbalances in estrogen, and the breakdown can be a little bit more complicated. When we talk about hormone detox, we're often talking about estrogen. So first, the liver actually uses these enzymatic processes to prepare estrogen to be excreted. And the liver does this for all kinds of things, for medications and toxins, other hormones, alcohol, and essentially neutralizes these things uh, so that they can be sent to the gallbladder and packaged up with bile. And you can think of bile as the body's garbage truck. When you eat a meal that contains fat, the bile takes all that garbage and brings it into the small intestine, and then it is eventually pooped out. So, unfortunately, there's a lot of ways this system can get disrupted and really affect our excretion of estrogen. So, if the liver is overwhelmed by alcohol or toxins, it can birth control is something that can really affect this because it just adds this additional burden for the liver to have to process. And as you can imagine, when the liver has more to do, it kind of slows things down. The liver also requires certain nutrients like B vitamins, antioxidants, magnesium, and it needs all these things to be able to process estrogen and prepare it for leaving the body. There's two phases of this liver detox of estrogen, and it can go through phase 1 and then have this like intermediary metabolite that is actually pretty inflammatory before it goes into phase 2 of detox. So if the liver is going through phase 1 really fast and then gets bogged down for phase 2, these inflammatory estrogen metabolites can float around the body and cause inflammation. So there's one way it can kind of disrupt the body. Another thing that can happen um, is in the next step of bile flow. So it goes through, let's just say it goes through the liver, okay, and then makes it into getting packaged with bile. So producing bile requires certain nutrients as well. It requires choline and glycine and taurine, these amino acids, as well as cholesterol. And so if you're having that breakdown in digestion in the first place and you don't have these nutrients that the liver or bile need, you could have some hiccups there. Some people also just have sluggish bile flow because they're not producing enough stomach acid or they have a low fat diet. And so there can be a lot of different things that kind of prevent estrogen from even making it to the gut. Then once estrogen, that like water soluble processed estrogen makes it to the gut, you kind of really need to have a healthy gut microbiome because there are certain bacteria that produce an enzyme called beta glucuronidase that essentially break up that package of estrogen and liberate it so the estrogen then recirculates into the body. And that ultimately throws off your balance of estrogen and can contribute to estrogen dominance. So all these things can contribute to estrogen dominance, the breakdown on the liver front, not having good bile flow, or having imbalances in the gut microbiome. And the recirculation of estrogen can really affect so many things downstream because the ratio of estrogen to progesterone is really important for many reasons, but in terms of hormonal acne, progesterone regulates the production of androgens. And when progesterone drops, androgens become relatively higher and more active.
Mhm.
And this leads to your skin cells are very sensitive to the amount of androgens in your blood because it makes your skin cells produce more sebum that is often thicker. So thick, sluggish sebum clogs pores and that increases acne. So that was a very long answer to talk
No,
about
that's great.
how our gut and our detox pathways really have such a huge impact on our hormones.
Mhm. I love the way that you broke it down because I think that, it is I mean, it's obviously such a nuanced thing. Every biochemical aspect of our bodies is absolutely nuanced. We're fairly evolved life in the grand scheme of things, but I think that you broke it down really nicely. I think with, the internet and, a lot of people talk about these things and hormone balance is a buzzword, and that's not a bad thing. But you do hear a lot of things that just get passed down the line and we lose the why. We hear estrogen dominance can cause acne, but why? And why does it happen in the first place? And why does its relationship to progesterone matter? All these things that are very important to understand also, because then you can also help pinpoint where exactly in this process your body is struggling. And so, if you already, there have been times in my life where I've known beyond a shadow of a doubt I have low progesterone for, XYZ reasons from my own research that I did. And just knowing that helped me balance that out a lot better. And I think with the stress, everyone's very stressed all the time. So low progesterone's not exactly uncommon. But yeah, I think that you broke it down really well. And we talked about acne, but what are some other signs other than skin issues that estrogen's not being metabolized properly?
Great question. If we kind of circle back to this whole process that I was describing, and how your digestion is so important for taking out the trash. So if you're not having a 1 to 2 bowel movements every day, then estrogen is not being excreted properly. So constipation is one sign right there. And then there are some more obvious things that are related to our cycles, like PMS symptoms, especially tender breasts, fibroids. Heavy bleeding is a really big sign that something's going on with estrogen metabolism. Migraines, intense mood swings, irregular cycles. But also, what you might want to look out for are some less obvious signs that are related to sluggish bile flow. So, things related to poor bile flow are bloating within a couple hours after a meal or nausea after meals. And because bile is so important for digesting fats as well, if you have a hard time eating meals that contain a good amount of fat, that's a sign that you're probably not releasing enough bile. Clay or light colored stools is another sign. Um, and then because bile's important for digesting fats, it's also important for absorbing fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A, vitamin D, E, and K. And all of those actually play a big role in skin health. So, like dry or itchy skin, getting sick a lot, not having enough vitamin D, like those are also some signs that there's something going on with bile. And if there's something going on with bile, there's something going on with detox.
And with the vitamin D as well, I can imagine there's a lot of mood related symptoms for that also. So if you're not absorbing vitamin D, that's definitely not going to help, depression, anxiety, or anything in that category. So you have an inside out approach that uses nutrition as a first line of defense, which I'm sure everyone has picked up on that at this point. So I'd love to talk about some more specifics about key nutrients in relation to skin health and if there's anything, we've obviously talked a lot about the mechanisms and everything, but is there any nutrients in particular that you often see are lacking in individuals who are really struggling with skin health, or just generally foods or ingredients that we should be incorporating to really promote our skin health?
Yeah, as so even just talking about the liver, I was saying there's like so many nutrients needed just for your liver to do all the things that it wants to do. So I think first, eating a whole foods diet before we even get into specific nutrients, getting 25 to 30 grams of protein in each meal, trying to eat a variety of different plants. I tell my clients to try to get 25 to 30 different species of plants each week, and which may sound intimidating, but like herbs, spices, having herbal tea, going to the grocery store and really seeing what's in season and experimenting with different plants, like all of those things are going to diversify the vitamins and minerals that you're getting in your diet that your body really needs. But like there are certain nutrients that even with like a lot of concerted intentional effort that are just really hard to get just because our soils are depleted. Some foods are just like going to be more expensive and harder to get, like wild caught fish. So I really think like magnesium is a nutrient that almost everyone should be supplementing with. I really like magnesium glycinate, that form. That's one of the most bioavailable ones. And then omega-3 fatty acids are also really hard for people to get in their diet unless you're like living in Japan and eating a lot of fish. Um, but omega-3s can be found in like fatty fish like salmon. If you are someone that likes sardines, that's great. Chia and flax are also some good plant sources, but that's something that if you're not eating a lot of those foods like on a daily basis, I would recommend getting a high quality supplement and make sure you're looking into how that's sourced. Because if you're just going to your like drugstore and getting an omega-3 there, those ones are often rancid and are just going to cause inflammation. So look for a high quality omega-3. And then, like I mentioned before, you could be taking these supplements and eating a really nutrient dense diet. But if you're not absorbing those
Mhm.
nutrients, then you either just have really expensive pee or really expensive diet. You're not getting those nutrients. And so if you're someone that experiences like a lot of burping after meals or bloating, these are signs that your body is having a difficult time digesting the food. So betaine HCl with pepsin is stomach acid support, or getting a good digestive enzyme. Both those things can be really supportive to make sure you're getting the good stuff out of your food.
Do you have any tip? I'm glad you brought up supplements because I was going to ask you about that. I hear so many mixed reviews on, you know, you should be supplementing or you should be getting everything from your diet. I think just from the things that I've learned, the people I've spoken with, realistically, 21st century, I mean, we're in the United States. I think realistically, you do need supplementing for certain things if you're dealing with some of these issues. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Do you have any tips on finding high quality supplements? Because there are so many out there that are not what they say, that just they're not regulated at all.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good question. And I mean, I work through an online dispensary called Full Script. A lot of practitioners use it, and pretty much all the supplement brands there have been vetted for really high purity and good sourcing. I really like the company Designs for Health. They make pretty good supplements. Who else do I really like? Of course, now I can't think of anything,
I
but
get my magnesium from Thorne.
Thorn is good.
I don't okay.
I like Thorn.
Do you have a like a public full script dispensary? Just as like a side note here, like that I could put in the show notes, or is
I
it
do.
for
Yeah, I can share
okay.
that with you.
Okay, yeah, awesome. So for everyone listening, if you are interested in looking for high quality supplements, I will put Jackie's link in the show notes for you guys so that you can explore some of the supplements. But yeah, okay. So, if a listener is struggling with their skin health and they're feeling overwhelmed, obviously, we've talked about a lot of things in this episode. We dove into some of the science, which is amazing. But if somebody's like, okay, how do I integrate this? Where is like the simplest, lowest barrier to entry place to start?
Yeah, I think the best place to start is to take honest inventory of yourself. So, one way to do this is first take a look at your diet. You can use a food journal for this, and this is a great way to like really understand where there might be some holes in your diet or where you might be consuming like way more of something than you really thought. So, logging everything that you eat and drink over the course of a week. And then now, with AI being so accessible, actually, you can input your food journal into ChatGPT or something and ask it like, can you please let me know like my average daily protein, fiber, and micronutrients? And this can be so illuminating for you to understand like if you really are getting enough protein on a daily basis, and maybe you're like not eating any calcium. Like we just don't know unless we look. A food journal is also a good way to understand if you're getting enough water, and how much alcohol you're consuming. So, if as far as water, we want to be getting at a minimum half your body weight in ounces daily. So, those are some foundational places to start. And so, once you've kind of got an idea of diet and hydration, it's also really good to take inventory of your lifestyle patterns. So, are you getting movement throughout the day? I think a lot of people like sandwiched a lot of, most of their exercise maybe into one workout early in the day, just a few times a week. And then a lot of people are on their computers. And the human body was not designed for that. And so that might mean like scheduling little movement snacks throughout your day and actually setting timers on your phone to like make sure you get up and take like a 5-minute walk or do some air squats. And then stress obviously plays such a big role in our health and our skin. It's a big driver of the blood sugar imbalances. And we talked about how blood sugar imbalances drive up insulin and that causes
Mhm.
acne. So, what are you doing to regulate your nervous system in this crazy world? And everyone's going to be a little bit different in what brings them that calm. Like meditation is not for everyone. Maybe you're someone that goes outside for like a very mindful walk, where you're
Mhm.
being really present with yourself. But finding those things to help regulate your nervous system are so important. And then, of course, sleep is a big part of this as well. If you're not getting good sleep, your body's going to just be under resourced and constantly kind of stressed. And so, really focusing on getting 8 hours of sleep every night is such a game changer. It's hard to do, but those kind of things really matter. And then finally, your beliefs about yourself. This is so important. I mean, if your inner self-talk is very negative and you don't believe that it's possible to heal, if you just think that it's going to be this way forever, it's going to be really hard to make a change. Your thoughts really matter, and trying to redirect these thought patterns can also be really important in changing your health and clearing your skin.
That's a really important part that not everyone includes, but because it feels so abstract, right? It's like, like my thoughts don't cause my acne, my thoughts don't cause my endometriosis. And like, yeah, that's true. But also at the same time, your thoughts can perpetuate a narrative that you're telling yourself. And it's certainly not helping the situation. And fixing your thoughts maybe won't fix the whole picture, but it's all these things that you said. It's, each little part. And I love also what you said about really taking an audit of your life, like really being honest, keeping a food journal, being diligent about it, at least for a few weeks. And I mean, I would argue, especially on this podcast, that you need to do it for at least a full cycle.
Mhm.
Um, if you are cycling, because the way that your body is digesting and acting and, all these different factors will change based on your hormone levels, as we've learned. Like, your hormones are very intimately connected to the gut and to the entire system. And so, um, the natural fluctuation in your hormone levels also could affect when you're bloating, when certain foods are more irritating to you. And these are all really important things to notice, and it's something I preach on the podcast all the time, is get as much data on yourself as you possibly can. Unfortunately, with women's health specifically, we don't have good quality data. We don't have adequate data at like this higher level, at a clinical level or research level. And so knowing yourself as best as you possibly can is going to help you heal. It's going to help you advocate for yourself. It's going to save you time, in the future. And so I love that advice. I do have one last question that I like to ask all of my guests. If you could rewrite the health class curriculum that every woman deserves, what would your first lesson be?
Uh, man, what if we were taught like some of the stuff that we talked about today? I would have loved to just have a better understanding of how my like hormonal health was related to my the food that I eat, like how hormones are made from the fats and vitamins and minerals in our diet. I don't think that was really told to me, and I really took for granted that hormonal regulation and the production of hormones and detoxing of hormones really requires not only like having these nutrients available, um, but to be supporting the body in all those other ways, like getting enough sleep and moving my body. And like, I just think that we're given such a narrow view of like what female health is. And unfortunately, like it takes things kind of going wrong to start to understand that we are this like very complex interdependent organism that is so resilient but also requires a lot of care. And
Mhm.
health is not really about taking the right supplement, but is much more about like these less sexy things of beliefs and sleep and food, all the things that you just like don't really realize how important they are until things start going wrong.
Mhm. I think that would be an amazing lesson for everyone to have, because you could prevent some, like you said, like we kind of have to wait for things to go wrong before we realize just how little we know. Not just we individually, but we as a society, how little we know about the female body specifically. And yeah, high school biology was like sufficiently complicated. So, like, I don't think that this would be a very complicated concept to introduce, but it's all very reductionist. Like, you're right. It's all just these tiny little symptoms. And we learn about cellular respiration, and, you can dive super deep into all of these different things, but from like an actual useful, like full system approach that can be integrated into a child's life, like that would be so useful to be talking about in high school biology class. And I'd argue a lot more people would be a lot more motivated if they could see the direct implications it has on their day to day, on
Yeah.
what they're eating. So I think that that would be an absolutely incredible lesson. This has been an amazing interview, Jackie. We have touched on so many different things. I think that everyone will need to get their notebooks out for this one, which is great. I love when we have like more science focused episodes. So, we mentioned the full script link that I'll put for everybody in the description. Where else can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm not big on social media, but I have a website, JacquiMeehanNutrition.com, and I put out a weekly email with like so much information, like on topics kind of like what we covered today. If you're interested in working with me, there's a link there to schedule a free consultation. Um, yeah, so if you're interested in getting more information or working with me, please get in touch.
Awesome. And I will have that linked for everybody below. So it's nice and easy. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope that you all learned something new today. Make sure that you rate and review to help me out. Share this with a friend who you think would enjoy it, and class dismissed.